Working Cows Podcast, episode 157.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, here with another episode for you, powered by the Global Ag Network. And I'm really excited to be joined by Reilly Sasse today. He is the guy behind Tomcat Manufacturing, part of the team behind Tomcat Manufacturing, and we're going to talk to him today about watering livestock. I do want to let you know that towards the end of this episode, after I talk with Reilly, I am going to share a little bit of a story about my time in Nebraska and the episode that got published down there, and just include a little bit of my own telling of my own brain fart. So if you want to stick around and listen to that at the end of the episode, I'll share with you that little event. But for now, excited to talk about livestock watering with Reilly Sasse of Tomcat Manufacturing. Reilly, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
You bet. I'm glad to be here.
You are providing a product to the marketplace, a number of products to the marketplace through your business, Tomcat Manufacturing. I was recently at a Jim Garris grazing workshop, and everybody kind of stood up at the beginning of that and introduced themselves and their ranch, and the most commonly shared challenge was about water. So how are you helping people to overcome the challenges related to watering livestock?
Well, yeah, that's been our biggest focus is water, and it seems to us from what we hear from everybody that the number one challenge is water mobility, and then they either don't have it at all or they've got bad quality water, And so we've worked on a number of solutions that we think are solving those issues. And obviously, like we were talking as we go along, we've learned a lot more about all the other facets of the industry. And so we're trying to wrap in other benefits as well, but yeah, basically on the water mobility side, that's kind of the biggest thing that we see people are dealing with is they can't get the water where they want it. And so we're trying to solve that issue with some of these products.
And what are some of the benefits of better water mobility as far as you have seen them play out on different people's places that have employed some of the products that you guys have, or deployed some of the products that you guys have on offer?
Yeah, so there's little things and big things. I mean, one of the things that always jumps out to me the quickest is when you go through some of these old ranches, you see these deep trails where the cows have walked to the water for years and years, and sometimes they're 6, 8, 12 inches deep trails where there's just no vegetation whatsoever. And we've seen where moving the water around, Jim Garris talked about how the concentration of the minerals and nutrients happens around the water. But if there's too much traffic, then it beats it into oblivion, and so I've seen a lot of those dead dry spots, where there's no vegetation pop up with green vegetation, That's one of the little things that I've noticed. It's really cool.
How did you guys get started? I guess talk about a few of the products that you guys are offering, and kind of, I think there's probably a fair amount of adaptability and kind of willingness to build to suit somebody's needs. But can you talk about some of the products and then what you guys, how you guys got started doing what you're doing with Tomcat Manufacturing?
Yeah, so everything we build, we try to build it with the mindset, with a modular mindset, so that because everybody has different budgets and everybody has different herd sizes and property sizes and different uses, and so we try to build it with this theme that you can start at whatever size you want and then add on to it, and all the pieces fit together. And so, but yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, there's obviously a lot of applications too where we'll just build a custom setup for people, whether it's got a certain size pump with a solar setup on it or whatever. But generally the pieces, we try to build it so it all goes together and can be scalable, and then fit with your investment plan and all that, you know.
So how did you guys get started doing that?
Yeah, so we just kind of fell into it. We started learning about it a number of years ago with the holistic management and soil health and all that. And you know, we weren't necessarily born into a big ranching family or anything like that, and we didn't have ranches of our own, but we wanted to be part of it. And you know, we've got a background in engineering and manufacturing and that, so we thought, let's bring that skill set to the market and see if we can improve how these people can operate with our products, you know. And so we've tried to learn everything we can about, you know, everything from cell grazing to water management to cattle health and all that, from the perspective of how can we augment it with our products and give the producers the maximum flexibility they need to fit their environmental needs and whatever they got going, you know.
And do you guys typically find that like underground water is preferable to water out of a dam, or is it kind of depends on the environment and the situation, or what are you guys seeing as some of the ways that people are deploying the products you guys are offering?
Yeah, I mean, generally, so generally the rule of thumb is water that's exposed to the air, whether it's rainwater or water in a reservoir or a pond, is better for plant life. And as long as, you know, it's decent quality, and by that I mean it doesn't have too much algae and things like that, it's good for livestock as well. But when it's surface water, it's a lot harder to control your volumes and everything. And so that's kind of where the wells come in. Is you know, we'll help plan where to put the wells. We can get the water in the right places. But I would say that we treat a lot more well water than we do surface water. In fact, I can't think of any places right now where people are treating surface water. You know, rainwater is amazing. It's high in nitrogen. It's got all the stuff you need, as long as it doesn't sit stagnant and doesn't have any, you know, if it's lacking in oxygen or aeration or things like that, that can kind of, you know, make it not very good. But
does pumping it fix that issue, or does it go deeper than that?
Yeah, it goes deeper than that, I would say. I mean, obviously, when you pump it and then you discharge it into a water trough, you are adding some oxygen to it, so that helps, you know, just moving it a little bit. But we're installing some treatment systems on some different wells. Actually, people are using it a lot for residential use as well. But water treatment, we're having a lot of good success with water treatment in animal health and production, because, you know, it's like, you know, I mean, there's, especially in our region, there's water that's very high in total dissolved solids, and especially when it comes to all the salts, livestock can be drinking as much as they want, and the water is literally just dehydrating them the more they drink it, you know.
You're preaching to the choir there. When I use just regular old coarse salt in my water softener, I go through 2 bags a week.
Wow.
So
yeah.
My neighbor had his well tested, and it's on the same elevation plane as mine, just across the river on the other side. And he said that when it came back, the test came back, he said it was 64 grains hard. He's like, I'm not sure how it bends to get out of the pipe.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so, we've got a lot of water treatment. I mean, we could employ a chemist and probably only do water treatment, and, you know, and have a whole life's work to do, you know. But
so talk to me about
a system.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just saying, talk about some of the water treatment. What does that look like? What are some of the mechanics of that? How's it deployed?
Yeah, so far we're just using a really system called Oxyblast, and it's basically just injection of hydrogen peroxide. So you're basically injecting, you know, hydrogen and 2 parts oxygen. And so it acts as an oxidizer in one way. It'll get rid of certain bacteria that cause the algae and things like that. But then um, it also will help sequester some of the total dissolved solids and make them so that they'll flow through the system and they won't inhibit, the animal's ability to retain the minerals and the things they need. So it's a really simple system. It's literally just a pump and an injection port, and we put it in anywhere from 25 to 100 parts per million, depending on how bad the water is. And sometimes we'll ramp it up a little higher than that to get the water cleaned up in the piping system. There's some infrastructure that needs cleaned up, and then we'll tail it down to just a maintenance injection. And so, as like parts per million, 25 parts per million is super minimal. But yeah, we've had really good success with it. There's some dairy farms that have gotten a lot more milk production, 7 pounds a day more milk.
I guess it's continual then? You said once you get that first kind of shock to the system, then there's the maintenance use of the product. So it's kind of an inline deal where the water as it goes out to the tank is passing through this system. Is that right?
Yep. So we usually install it, at the wellhead or by a cistern or a tank storage system, something like that. So you can set it up so that it either runs off a flow meter or it just runs whenever the well pump kicks on. And so that way you're ensuring you get the right parts per million. And then we've got a test strip that we sell with the unit that you just test it once in a while and see if it's where you want it. Then you can adjust the pump really easy. So it's a pretty straightforward system. And some of them, we've had a few people request the system to be actually just mounted right on the water tank systems, because hydrogen peroxide does use itself up. And so, like if you're sending the water a long ways, it can actually spend itself before it gets to your discharge point if you've got a lot of organics in your water. And so obviously some organics are good. And so you want certain organics but not others, right?
Right. You're not looking for inert water, essentially.
Right. And that's the whole thing with these filtering systems, is some of these filtering systems I'm not a fan of because they take everything out of the water until you have nothing. You don't, the water's actually starved for nutrients and things, which is why, like at home, like I use RO water for coffee because it makes the most amazing coffee because it's starved for anything, Yep. But I don't drink it because it's not good for you.
Huh. Yeah, that's what we use as well for coffee. And actually, when I was doing some research on it, they were talking about that RO is so starved for minerals. They didn't necessarily put it in those terms, but that's what they were saying, that it will draw minerals out of the metal inside of your coffee maker to the point that rather than scaling up, it's the opposite. It's drawing those out, and you can have failures in the equipment because of that. So,
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and that's what we're drinking. So,
right.
That's why I'm a big fan of this oxyblast system, because it's and it gives you the control that, hey, if you want high total dissolved solids, you can have them, but you can kind of have it right where you want it. You know what I mean? And if you want filtering, you can still add filtering on top of this treatment system, so it's pretty flexible and it's low cost. And I honestly think the reason it's not more popular is because there's not enough money to be made. If I was a plumber, I'd rather put in a $25,000 treatment system than this $300 pump.
Right. Yeah.
So
I always say that's kind of the challenge of finding advertisers for a regenerative agriculture podcast, because basically we're telling you you don't need all the inputs, so nobody's going to pay me to tell you don't need the inputs.
Right, exactly.
So that's
right.
That's kind of the same idea. What are you guys, your primary, or the first thing that I saw you guys come to market with, or first product I was aware of, was your portable tank systems. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so we designed 2 of those to start, and like with any product, we went through tons of prototypes, and then we would send them out to the ranchers and have them test them, and we'd have a list of fixes and issues. And so it's been basically like with those products, with the key, we call them the keyhole and the Missouri. The Missouri is a 1,000-gallon tank, and the keyhole is a 250-gallon tank. And you can kind of see the logic there. It's basically just for different size producers, what they're after. We do encounter a misconception fairly often that with ranchers that they got to have this massive tank for their cows, and they don't really. I mean, the cows, they know they'll take turns and that kind of thing. You can water a lot more cows off a smaller tank than a guy would think, But we've finally got those to where we've worked all the bugs out of them, and we're working with some dealerships on getting them spread out a little bit around the market and a little more available, because right now it's kind of tough for people because we can only produce so many of them. And we're working with some manufacturers to build them to our designs and that, so we can scale it a little bit and make them a little more available. But some of that stuff was really interesting and fun to go through with, even the liner. A lot of people ask about the liner, like, is that thing really tough enough? So, like, I don't know if you've seen it, but a while ago we posted a picture of a buffalo standing in our water tank. Like, those things they're kind of impressive.
Huh.
I mean, we tried to get them to, that was one of the reasons we sent one to the Bison Ranch, because we wanted them to trash it and see what it would take, And but I think to date we've had one person call us and need a patch kit.
Wow.
And so, yeah, like they did better than we expected. I mean, they're obviously, being that they're a matrix, they got some vinyl in them. They are susceptible to sunlight, and so they're not going to last forever. But they've got a 5-year warranty on them, and I think that's better than most products you get on the market.
And so, what is the liner? What are you guys using for your liners?
It's basically a mix of PVC and vinyl, but it's got some fibers in it. It's got a real high puncture strength. And where we got them was actually from the firefighting industry. We got to working with a company that provides those temporary tanks for wildland fires, and we're like, hey, this might work. And so they build them custom for us to put in our tanks, and then we keep extras on hand in case people need them or whatever, but we send one out with every tank. And then like I said, we've been waiting for more failures, and it just doesn't happen. Like, they're pretty tough.
So how are people feeding those? Is it typically, because they're mobile, it's an over the ground pipe coming in? Yeah, so people use them in both applications. We built them so that they can be adaptable to any water source, whether it's gravity. Some of them we send them out with an onboard pumping system. But I would say the vast majority of people are using them with a float, and we like those Apex float valves because they hold up better to the cattle. The cattle can beat that float around and it doesn't hurt anything. Whereas like the old school copper with the black ball on it, had one rancher saying that he's got a bear coming and stealing his ball. So it's enjoyable, but yeah, I would say the vast majority of them are piping the water to the tanks. We've got a fair amount of them so they'll map out their paddocks, right? And then they run their infrastructure underground and have quick couplers, at each paddock. So they'll dump their tank, move it to the next paddock, hook it up to the quick coupler. And the main benefit there is just it keeps the water cool, because that's one of the challenges we're running into is, you run your water on top of the ground in a black pipe and it gets hot if you don't have the volume. And so sizing is important too. And, a lot of guys are running the pipe like in a fence line where the grass is a little taller and it shades the pipe a little bit. But yeah, I mean, volume is probably the best way to fix the temperature problem. And I think you might have mentioned this the other day. I'm kind of torn too still on whether it actually makes a big difference. I mean, some guys say it's a big deal and some guys don't. And I tend to think the animals will drink a little less if the water's hot.
and we want them drinking as much as they can, so
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to say, but yeah. And then, there was a lot of thought put into the height of them as well. 'Cause we wanted, there's some sheep producers that wanted to use them, and we wanted calves to be able to get into them, but not be drowning in them and that kind of thing. And so there's kind of a balance to all that with the design, But then the biggest thing that I think helped the design was we've got that big 10-inch dump on the end of it. So when you go to move that thing, you can empty the tank in about 30 seconds. You don't have to sit around waiting for this thing to empty so you can move it, So that was a debate early on too, is like, do you design a tank that can be hauled full so you're not wasting the water? Or do you design a tank that's light? And, eventually we elected to go with the light tank so it can be pulled with any unit. I mean, these are so light you can move them by hand even.
Right.
And so that was what we felt people would want. And, we may eventually develop one that's rigid that holds water while you move it as well. But for now, that was our first stab at it. So
for the water temperature issue, do you think that the actual quality of the water is more important than the temperature of the water? Are you seeing that play out in the wild, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the quality of the water is definitely more important than the temperature, because animals have instincts, and if they're thirsty, they're going to drink whether it's warm or cold. They just may drink a little less if it's warm or if it's undesirable, but they don't always know if the water is bad. Mm-hmm. And they can be drinking bad water. So I just had an example the other day. I was watering my horses out of the creek, and they just weren't slicking up on this spring grass. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I wormed them, and I thought, what am I missing? Well, I finally put a water tank out there and filled it with good water, and they slicked right up. So there was something in the water in the creek that wasn't, but they just keep drinking it. They don't know any better. So yeah, I think water quality is huge. And I think everybody should test their water. A water test is cheap. It's $100, and you know what you're feeding your animals. And nowadays with all the technology available, it's pretty easy to tweak the water so it's optimum for the animals. I had one rancher he had a lot of calves aborting. He actually didn't pin it down to the water. He didn't know what the problem was, but he kept, he had a lot of calves aborting. It was like 30% one year, and he just could not figure out if it was, pine needles or what it was. Well, he treated his water, and the problem completely went away. And so in his case, yeah, we think it was something in those total dissolved solids, whether it was high salinity or something like that. Iron doesn't seem to bother him a whole lot, but other than it just tastes bad,
What about, I see some solar options too, and you've mentioned those. Have you been having good success with those as far as reliability? And you kind of talk about the different ways that the solar gets deployed, depending on whether it's pumping out of a dam or pumping out of an old well, and some of those things.
Yeah, so I'm no different than anybody else. I'm a little old school in some ways, and I was resistant originally to the solar idea, but once you start using it, it is the slickest system, and it's simple. Like, you don't have to be an electrician to figure out how it works and diagnose some of your own problems and things like that. And the products and technology came so far with that solar now that I don't know if you've seen them, but we've got kits and stuff on our website where they're plug and play. Like, you can, like me, who knew nothing about electrical, I could do it, and that's the cool thing about solar, is it's gotten to a point now where anybody can use it, and there's enough information out there and available as well that if there is something you can't figure out, you can usually make a phone call and somebody knows,
Yep.
But the products are getting more reliable as well. The pumps that we sell have a lifetime warranty, and I think, the exposure, the use that they're seeing, they're working out the bugs in them. There is one thing that's really frustrating still, is we can't find any solar panels that are made in America. And that was one thing. We wanted all our products to be American made,
Mm-hmm.
and we just cannot get a solar panel that's American made. And so that's kind of the last piece that we're still working on, is to try to get that figured out as far as the solar goes, but these pumps are amazing. I mean, they're good pumps, and there's a number of different configurations that you can set it up for, whether you want level sensing, say you got a well that produces water, but it goes dry. And so you don't want to, be running your pump dry and things like that. Well, you can drop these sensors in there that come with it, and the pump will just shut off. And so that way you're not sucking dirt or, running the pump dry or anything like that. But these mobile systems are probably the most popular, where they, like Brian Alexander had that mobile system that was pretty slick. And yeah, basically you just roll around to whatever water source, you can roll up to a pond or a well or whatever you got and throw your pump in there and go to pumping.
I guess one of the things that like I have thought about doing is rehabilitating an old pump jack well, and I suppose similarly you could rehabilitate a windmill as well with a solar system. Are you guys having good luck seeing those things work out?
Yep, we're having a lot of guys wanting to trade their windmills out for solar. Solar is just more dependable, So the way the metrics kind of work, it's tough to explain without graphs and things, but basically the storage ability, obviously with wind you have zero storage, right? So the wind blows, it pumps. All the tanks are usually set up on an overflow. When the tank gets full, it runs over and it goes down the draw. And then if you've got a lot of consumption and the wind doesn't blow, it may not fill back up. Whereas with solar, you can put your battery packs in, and you can size the system so that it literally only needs to see the sun a few hours a week. It just depends on what you're after, And but there's a lot of guys running them with just the solar, so they only pump during the day, and then they just make sure they have enough capacity so that they don't run out and during the day, the nighttime hours and that. But yeah, they're really dependable in that way. And what I like the most about them is you just have all the options. You can, raise it, lower it. You can speed it up, slow it down, size it to your herd and what your needs are. And like I said, we design the systems as well so that you can start out with, say, a 4-panel array and, low volume, low head. And then the next couple of years, you raise your herd size, you lease up some more property, you can just add to the system, and you can keep it mobile as well. You're not stuck to just having it in one place.
Can the same system used to rehabilitate a pump jack well or a windmill be used to pump out of a dam, or is that two different systems?
Yeah, it really can be pretty much the same system, other than you want to use a floating pump.
Right.
And so you would just have 2 pumps that go on the end of the same hose. You would just put a different pump on the end and throw it in the pond and it'll float. And then sometimes that can be a little tricky at windy conditions or anything like that. We'll tie ropes and different things to keep the floating pump where you want it, but it's really not that complicated. A lot of guys will just use a rope and a stake, and stake it to the edge of the pond where they want it. What you do is a triangle of rope so that if it pulls either way, it'll stay where you want it,
Sure. Or as I learned, if you're in the Sandhills in Nebraska and no pond is more than 5 feet deep, you could just use a boat anchor or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But yeah,
it works good. And we're also seeing a lot of wells being rehabilitated, like you said, where they go in and put a bridge plug in a gas well and then reperforate and, convert it to a water well. It saves a lot of money for people. So
are most people able to basically order the kit from you guys for a solar pump system and take care of the installation and deployment all on their own?
Yeah, I would say 90% of people can. They may not think they can, but once they see how simple it is, I mean, it's a control box and a set of panels, and it's, you plug in the wires basically. Like it's pretty simple. It would be like hanging a light in your house. Like it's pretty straightforward. And so, but we obviously, do the installs for people as well. We're obviously trying to stay focused on developing products, but don't want to get too spread out, because we feel like that's where we can bring the most value is developing. We've got a huge list of products we would like to develop, and so we try to stay focused on that. But we install treatment systems, we install solar panel systems, and we'll build all kinds of custom setups for people, because everybody has their own uses, so.
You mentioned water temperature. Are there any other challenges of a mobile water system?
I would say that's the biggest one. The other thing the other thing I think that we spend quite a bit of time on is trying to real simply delineate the exact application and what size. So we ask a lot of questions when people call for a unit, and then making sure that it's going to be flexible enough and do the whole. It's all doable. It's just, I would say that's a challenge as far as clearly understanding the application. Is there 120 feet ahead, or is there only 80? And then, because we don't want to sell people something that's way over the top, or doesn't fit what they're trying to achieve in that. And so that can be a challenge, because if you're not out there seeing it yourself, there's things that you don't think about. And if they don't mention it, then it's hard to make sure that we send them the right stuff. So we're improving that all the time. But I would say that with mobile water, that's probably the temperature issue is probably the biggest thing. The other challenge we're running into is the people that are running the poly on top of the ground. That stuff gets to be a real bear when you're running it, 1,000 feet, and then you want to reel it all back up and run it somewhere else. And so that's one of our next products we're developing, is a really slick way to have that on a trailer where you can just hit a button and reel up your pipe and go to the next spot,
Whoa, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be. I've got it all designed in my mind. We just got to move a little quicker, Yeah,
we watered 70 head of mostly yearlings in a 50-gallon tank with 1.5 inch poly line all summer, 2,000 feet of 1.5 inch poly line. And yep, I was right there with all the rest of those guys saying water's the biggest challenge. It's the limiting factor, I think, in most situations. And one of them is, you get, according to my calculations, or according to the application I found online to do the calculation for me, there's about 1,500 pounds of water in 2,000 feet of 1.5 inch line. And so that's a tough one to just drag around wherever you want it.
Right. It's heavy. I mean, you can't always just hook up with your 4-wheeler and tow it around. You got to drain it first, and it gets to be a pain if you're moving it around, which I think is, a good reason to bury your water infrastructure. But that's also what we're trying to eliminate, is all the cost people have to put into their infrastructure,
Right.
And so we'll get it. We'll figure it out. It's, that's why we're doing it, because we enjoy figuring that stuff out. So.
That sounds like a good start for sure. As far as thinking about a way to reel up water line and some of those things, that sounds really interesting.
Well, a lot of the technology is all there. It's just putting it together and getting it out to people. I mean, even the quick coupling parts are all there. It's all there. It's just getting it together into a system that is simple for people, and one of the things we were talking about too is having it so that it'll attach to the trailer.
Right.
So you can kind of tow this little train around, and then just unload it when you're ready. And
what are some of the success stories you like to tell as far as the people who have deployed some of your systems, and also I think another issue, especially for grazing livestock in the winter, is winter water that isn't a pain in the butt. So if you want to talk about some of those things, it'd be good to hear that.
Yeah, I would say the thing that we're probably most excited about right now is that geothermal unit, and we are taking orders for them, but they're not 100% ready to ship yet. We're still working on our final prototyping, basically, because we're working with a thermal molder that just getting their system set up, and we're still working the final issues out on that geothermal. But our goal was to develop a unit that's truly ice free. That we don't have to sell an ice pick with and say it's ice free. So we're really excited about that. We've tested it. Some of the prototypes we've tested down to 15 below, and there was no ice. And then our latest design that's going to be out, we think will be good to 40 below. But we're going to obviously verify it and run it ourselves and make sure. But no, it's a really cool system, and the prototypes that we have out there being used are just, people are just ecstatic about them. And we've got we call it the kid catcher. We've got a screen in there so that, your calves and kids and things can't fall into it. So that's, people are getting water where they couldn't get it before all winter long, and it's maintenance free, so that's pretty cool. The other success story I always like to talk about is the one I already mentioned, where the rancher we knew was losing all his calves, and then he treated the water and he got it, it went away. That to me is amazing, because 30% is a huge number. Most people are depressed when they hit 10%. So other than that, I just see a lot of people, they get these units and they get started, and they're suddenly able to get the stock density at a rate that they couldn't get it before, in areas where they couldn't get it before, and they just get super excited, and their minds start going, and they're expanding and getting more cows, and it's just really cool to see. So
sounds real good. Really glad we got to connect, and I guess I appreciate your time today. Is there anything else that we've left on the table as far as watering is concerned?
I don't think so. No, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit. And our biggest thing is we're working for those ranchers, so we always like the feedback.
And how should people go about getting a hold of you if they want to check out some of your systems and some of those things?
I would say on our website, tomcatmfg.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and good old-fashioned telephones. So,
sounds
we're
good.
Here.
Yep, and it's a good website. Lots of different options there. You can kind of look at what some of the systems look like and what it might look like. And you guys are kind of full service. I think when I originally talked to you guys, we were talking about maybe even ordering some poly pipe through you as well to go with the system. So you guys are kind of sourcing all that end to end, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from our other businesses we're in, is we have good accounts where we can buy stuff wholesale, and so we're able to compete with some of the pricing on some of that stuff. So we're wide open for pretty much end to end, like you said. And if we want people to be able to get what they want, and so if it's not something we do, we'll find you somebody that can,
Well, Reilly, I appreciate your time today.
You bet. Thank you, Clay.
So I don't know. I'm a little asleep, or I don't remember if I've told this story on the podcast, I guess. So here goes. I was planning to drive my van. I've shared pictures of my van on the Working Cows Facebook page before, down to Derek Schwannebeck's for the regenerative grazing workshop with Jim Garish. And my plan was, save a few bucks, sleep in the van. It's got the nice fold down seat in the back and everything. So plan to make use of that. So I drive down there, and I don't want to roll into Derek's house at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. So I decide I'll just sleep alongside the road, and so I pull off and climb into the back seat, get kind of settled in, and I go to send my wife a text message and let her know that I made it, and that I arrived alive, and that I'm bedded down for the night, and no service. So I drive back to the closest town, about 25 miles back, and I get service, and I send her a text message and let her know, found a spot to sleep, all good. Drive back. This time it's about 11:30, I suppose, maybe just after 11, and I get pulled off into this historic marker spot that I'd found kind of along the highway there. And as I'm pulling in, I see lights coming at me, and it's a train coming down the track, maybe 10, 15 yards from this historic marker. And I'm like, oh, great, right next to the train tracks. I couldn't see it because it was dark before that. And so I'm laying there, fall asleep, all seems well. I fall asleep about 11:45. A train goes by, wakes me up. 12:15, a train goes by. 12:30, a train goes by. 12:45, two trains pass each other going opposite directions. So I'm like, oh, forget it. So I get up and I climb into the front seat and I pull out my laptop and I work on editing the episode with Jason Mock, and I get that all done, and I'm still trains going by every 15, 20 minutes. And so I get that all edited, and I get my intro recorded and my outro recorded, and I put that all together. And then I'm still not having any luck. So I decide to try and find somewhere else to sleep. That train track parallels the highway for 30 some miles because that's how far I drove, and it was still right there. So I just drove back to the spot and parked at about 4:00 in the morning. I went to bed about 5:30 in the morning. I don't know if the pipeliners or who it was start going by on their way to work in the morning. So it was a short night there along the road. But all that to say, my brain fart was that I made an announcement about Patreon in that time that no longer producing bonus content, and that's not that I'm not going to do that. Bonus content is a lot harder than I originally anticipated it. So I've created a new tier of bonus content, but those who have ever been supporters of the show before October 1st of 2020, if you've been a $5 Patreon supporter, you will continue to get bonus content indefinitely as long as I'm able to produce it. So that is kind of my brain fart and how I'm remedying that situation. I have created a new tier for $10 after October 1st. $10 patrons will continue to will be entitled to the bonus content. But if you're in before October 1st, you're welcome to the monthly bonus content that I will continue. It might not be every month, but I'll try to make sure that it is on average monthly bonus content. So that's what I wanted to say. And one more update on Patreon. I also wanted to say they have changed a feature where you can pay yearly. So if paying yearly works better for you, you can switch on that feature. I think even if you're already a supporter, you can change that. So if you want to check all that out, patreon.com/workingcows is the place to go to check all that out. Coming up next week on the show, it'll be a little different. It's going to be more of a documentary style show, and I'll get into that a little bit more next week. But suffice it to say, raising my kids in church, one of the biggest things that weighs on my mind is that my kids would think of me as a hypocrite. And so I've got a standard that I have set for them as far as what content they can consume. And so I'm not going to produce content that I wouldn't allow my kids to consume. And so it's going to take some time to get this episode put together in a way that would be acceptable for my kids to consume, but I'm gonna do my best to do that and put that out next week. We will be talking to Michelle Reyness about being better leaders. I'll just say it that way for now, and when you catch on next week, you'll see what I'm talking about. But thank you guys for the support, and appreciate all of the community. Really just the community that has grown up around this podcast, and appreciate you guys. And we will be back real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.